We have a very compelling panel for you next with the Wall Street Journal. And when we talk about digitization of industry, again, you come back to a number of different themes. But one of the assertions that the panel will share with you, that we've shared with you, is that starting is no longer optional. The pace at which you go, the pervasiveness of it in your organization, how you manage risk, the labor arbitrage, those are all choices that are important considerations. But it is no longer possible to imagine efficiency, safety, reliability, automation without digitization. And that's not just our perspective, it's the perspective of the people in this panel. So we go back to this theme of you begin, you start. And that's really important. Now, we thought it was really interesting to go into this discussion with the perspective of separating fact from fiction. There's a lot of buzzwords thrown around this industry. And I love the title of this, What's Now and What's Next? What's true? And to help me separate truth from fiction a little bit, we have Rob Sloan from the Wall Street Journal. Rob? So Rob, you were telling me you live in the Lake District. We were talking about the start of the first industrial revolution. And in your current role, you actually, as a journalist, spend a lot of time talking to people, separating fact from fiction. Tell me a little bit about your perspective in terms of where this industry is and the journey we're about to discuss with our panelists.
Yes, I think one of the key challenges that any decision maker, any executive has, is separating fact from fiction. What's hype, what's marketing buzzwords, and what's reality. And I think that's getting more difficult. The pace of technological change is quickening constantly. We have more and more to learn. We have less time. And particularly for the non-technical senior decision makers, it's a real challenge. If you look at what we're writing around every day, 5G, blockchain, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, these are technologies that are not easy to get your head around. You have to invest time in understanding what they mean, how they're going to impact your business, how they fit into your strategic plans, which are threats, where the opportunities are, and to get yourself to a point where you can separate the vendor claims, fact from fiction. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot written that varies in quality widely. I'd like to think we're at the better end of that, but it puts a lot of pressure on me and my peers who are writing about these subjects to get it right from the start, to get the right level, to send the messages nice and clearly. And what I found particularly interesting so far is spending time in the Innovation Hub and seeing what is fact, what's there right now, how this is going to change the way we do business. It's a fascinating area to be working in.
You know, one of the comments you made when we were talking earlier that I really appreciated is even an institution like the Wall Street Journal finds that the people who practice have the best perspective on these things. And so I think that is a great handoff for us to ask the panel to join. And I'll step off and I'll let you begin the conversation. Thank you very much.
So you've probably detected from my accent already that I'm not an Atlanta local. And I'm not going to embarrass myself or cause offense by trying to do the accent. Although if I do slip a yawl in later, don't be too harsh on me. I grew up in the north of England, which nowadays suffers from a lot of the problems cities in America suffer from. Urban decay, unemployment, economic depression. But 250 years ago, it was a very, very different story. The north of England was the economic powerhouse that fueled the first industrial revolution. From around 1760, and for the next 70 years or so, machines were built that replaced tasks that were previously done by hand. New processes were developed to produce iron, chemical manufacturing began, and steam became widespread use to power fast factories that sprung up across the country. It shaped the landscape and it left an architectural and a cultural imprint that remains to this day. The goods produced in the north of England were sent all around the world. It fueled a global trade boom. It increased GDP, created wealth, promoted the growth of business, and there's broad agreement from historians that this period of innovation was one of the most significant periods in the history of humanity. Now, since the mid-1800s, we've seen further improvements in automation and mechanization that have allowed us to significantly increase production. By the 1980s, we began to harness software, digitize our industries, and allowed further improvements in speed, efficiency, and precision. And today, to this panel, we're witnessing the fourth industrial revolution, the industrial Internet of Things, mobile technologies, advanced sensors, decentralized data processing in the cloud, and artificial intelligence propelling us further and further forward. We've got 4 experts on the panel who are able to share their very different views on what's now and what's next in industrial automation and digitization. So I'm going to hand it over to each of them to introduce themselves and say a few words on their experience in the subject.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I want to start just before we get going. 1, congratulations, and 2, for Schneider, this is a classic example of the community side of their business, and I just think that's amazing. So I think for them, one more. Well done. Well done. So I'm Daniel Haar. I'm the operations director at Delta Systems and Automation. We're a company based out of Northwest Arkansas, and we build the actual machines and solutions of automation for the food packaging industry.
Good deal. Good afternoon. I too have to sit here and say congratulations, and I hope you guys know that you are our future. A lot of the tools that we are discussing over these 2 days, things that we'll talk about on this panel, you guys will use a lot of those and improve those. So thank you for participating in this program, and thank you to Schneider for doing this. My name's Johnny Howes. I work for Southern Company, which owns Georgia Power, Alabama Power, Mississippi Gulf Power, a few more franchises. Specifically, my role is the plant manager of Plant Share, where we have a 3,700 megawatt facility powered by coal. I will tell you right now, it's an interesting time in our business because we've had tons of process automation equipment in place as we manage our power plant. But at the end of the day, when I think about our future and I think about who we will hire in this industry and basically the workforce of tomorrow in this world, at Plant Share, we're trying to figure out the new tools that we will use from a digitalization standpoint that will carry us into the future. So thank you for having me here, and I look forward to serving on this panel with you guys.
Great. Hi, I'm Doug Kushnerick. I'm with ExxonMobil in our research and engineering area. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I've been in the automation and plant computing part of our business for the better part of 30 years. So it's an honor to be able to talk about that today with the rest of the panel. Digitization's been really important in our business for many decades now. If you go back to the beginning of the third revolution and the beginning of the digital implementations in plants, companies like ours, along with vendors like precursors from Schneider, helped to invent the systems that we use now for digital control in a lot of the plants around the world. We're kind of faced with a challenge now to migrate a lot of those older systems to newer and available technology that's coming out now, and it's really an interesting challenge for us.
My name is Jeff Martin. I am the marketing manager for the EPIC group, or Carollo Engineers. We're a water wastewater engineering group, and I've been in the automation industry for about 30 years. I want to thank Schneider and Rob and the Wall Street Journal for allowing us to be up here today and to share with you things that we've been experiencing. I too want to say congrats to the young kids, because education, I think, is one of the key things that we're going to see in the near future involved with digitization. And I think it's going to be really important as to how we educate not only the young kids that are going to join us in the ranks, but those amongst us, our clients and our customers, as to how we actually go forward in the digitization world.
Brilliant. Well, welcome, and thank you all for being here. I want to start by separating hype from reality around the term fourth industrial revolution. Would you mind giving me some views? Daniel, I could maybe start with you. Is this fourth revolution, is it as significant as the other three?
I think it's just as significant, and we're in it. And the difference there is the people who know we're in it, those that know they're prepared, those that have the foundation in place and don't know they have it in place, but it's actively happening around us, and we're seeing results, impacts, and changing our business right now to go down that path with it.
I think you said it best. We're in it. And we have to recognize across industry that we're in it. And so there's always a place to get started. You just have to move forward. You think about where we've come from with the evolution of paper processes and all those types of things, and how slow business was during those times of 15, 20 years ago. And look at how fast we make decisions now with the way we do business and the digital tools that go with that allow us to move faster, make faster decisions. We're already in, and a lot of people may not realize it, but it's only going to get faster as we go forward from here. And so that's why it's important that we recognize what's at stake. Okay.
Doug, I imagine petrochemical industry is at the forefront of this. Are you seeing significant changes?
Well, are we seeing significant changes? I really wanted to thank you for bringing up speed, Johnny, because that's really a huge thing for us. The pace of everything now is much faster. So the connectivity that this brings and the calculational intensity that lies behind the physical systems, if you're looking at this as a cyber-physical activity, really changes the pace of everything. So it kind of impacts the way we look at our supply chain and we execute our supply chain. It changes the way we think about decision-making in our plants. We've had online systems for years that model what goes on in the plant and how it behaves and what the optimum decisions are. But the expectations and the capabilities now are just so much higher for being able to do that at a greater pace. And we're seeing that in both the transactional part of the business and the manufacturing part of the business.
And what are those underlying technologies that are helping speed that change? In your business, at least, it may vary for the other panelists.
Yeah, well, certainly large data systems that are much more interconnected than we have now. Cloud applications that tie our people to those data systems are starting to creep in a much more pervasive way. It's something that's always been part of the business, but the connection of the employees that we have that are working in the field to the data around them, whether it's observing what's going on in our processes or trying to figure out how to make changes to them. You know, I'm sure you face that in a plant. It's a really big deal, and it just kind of empowers the workforce to move at a much higher speed.
I think a tone that keeps hitting in there too that I want to speak to a little about what's specific about this revolution is what we're saying, the data that's there. It's been there. We've all made the jokes that we've been collecting the data for years, and it's a ton of it, to the point of like, why are we collecting this and what's important with that? I think what's driving this revolution and what will drive it is that in prior revolutions, it was what was invented and then how we applied it and the ideas around it and making those innovations off of that tangible, where this one is data is going to drive what those innovations are. Data is going to drive us to those optimizations, and that's where we're headed, and that's what this conversation really is going to be focused around, is the data behind it, because we've got the data. It's been there. It's what do we do now? It's such a high speed.
I think the last piece I'll add to that, particularly for our business, there's not a lot of O&M reductions out there to be had because we've all been good stewards of customer funds and monies and budgets and things like that. And so if there's no big bucket out there to be had, it's about how do you incrementally get better, or strategically, how do you impact your business to drive the results strategically that you want. And so to do that, you have to take all of this data that we're talking about and say, okay, what data really can help us make better decisions, because a lot of money's tied up in how we make decisions. So when we talk about speed and the what's and hows, it's all wrapped up in this data that we have to unleash.
So Jeff, you've got the data, you've got the speed, you've got the processes. What's the opportunity for companies that get this right?
Well, if we look at traditionally the industries that we're large ones that we're aware of, like what Delta has done with the predictive maintenance of in-flight engine analysis, and we look at the railroad CSX with identifying where all their assets are around the world, and we look at the numbers and the dollars of savings that they have achieved through their predictive maintenance and through these asset tracking. It's, it's pretty amazing. And we look at it and think, I come from the water wastewater industry, which is a slow adapter, but we know in time that the things that we look as, possibilities, energy, chemical usage, things of that nature will come. It just may take time for the analysis and the tools that we need to be user-friendly and more simplify them to where operators can really, enjoy the fruits of those things without having to be database experts and SCADA experts, et cetera. But back to the root of your first question, there was a great little article in Time a couple weeks ago. Stefan Schwartzman, who is a philanthropist for MIT, just donated $300 million to build a new piece to their business school. And the quote is wonderful. He wrote all about AI. He wrote, "We need to make it baked into the curriculum, no longer just run and hide from it." And I think that's a really true statement about where we're at, because of what John and they've said is, this is upon us, it's here. And I think Stephen's donation to an institution of that magnitude to say, we have to make this part of what we're actually growing up with now, and not just trying to latch onto it or, be there when the wave crashes.
Right. I think the opportunities for the companies that get it right, I'm a huge fan of saying, what has history showed us? Look at how you started, speaking of each one of the revolutions, and what you saw out of that is companies rise up that embraced it. I think we're going to see that in time, or already happening. The ones that are positioned well, that have the partners, the right ideas, and the right culture, those are the ones that will shoot out of it like a cannon, and you'll see what their real opportunities are, because they'll be achieving them a lot faster.
Are there industries that came at this much earlier, adopted the technology earlier, took the risks early on, who are now seeing the benefits? I mean, Jeff, you said water and wastewater are slower at adopting.
Yep.
Are there some that were much faster?
I can speak for our industry and where we're at, and a lot of what we've done in a very quick amount of time, working with our team and Schneider on the exo structure machine side, is that we're out there seeing the benefit, and our customers are seeing that benefit today already because of what we've put out in the field as recent as 2016. It's the IoT that we can support customers worldwide sitting in Arkansas. We can go in and look at anything we need to in a machine and not have to take the flight, and more importantly, the time to get there to assist our end users. And I think that's where you're going to see that's that foundation that eases that transition, that we just keep building it up so that the water can catch up to us in time.
I think about other industries like the retail industry, and how things like blockchain in terms of transactions are coming into play. I had an aha moment last year. We filmed a movie at my power plant. Some of you in the audience may have seen The First Man. It talks about Neil Armstrong being the first man on the moon. Well, the rocket scenes where they were getting onto the rocket were filmed at Plant Sheridan. And so when you walk around the plant every day, you see the structure, you just don't think that's a movie. But when I got behind the scenes and I saw all the technology that was going into making it what it eventually ended up being, I said, this is a game changer in terms of how things are simulated, how AI was used to do some of those things. And I had no clue that that industry was as large or as big into technology and innovation as it was. So a lot of stuff going on.
I think one of the big changes in how some of the businesses operate with this is the connection of these immensely large data systems that we've had for plants and manufacturing. You alluded to that, and you mentioned Delta. The connection of those kinds of systems with the business decision-making systems in real time has been kind of transformative for us. So that's, you asked about who gets out in front. I think that's something that we were able to do in oil and gas kind of early on, but pushing the technology further out than what was really available at the time. The systems that are available now really make that a much more seamless connection of the manufacturing data floor to business decisions that you're trying to make, and that's made a big difference.
And when we're thinking not in terms of industry, but in terms of geography, is North America at the forefront of digitization? Putting you all a little bit on the spot here. I know we're all US based, but
It's like a US panel, we're going to say absolutely yes.
a biased audience. So let's say yes, we're all out in front.
You say you look at Jean Pascal's opening on Schneider, a $30 billion company, and really where their streams are coming from across all their platforms was pretty evenly spaced out. But I will absolutely say that we're the leaders.
Ditto.
There you go.
Johnny, staying competitive is an obvious driver to get companies to digitize, to move along. Can you give us an idea of the scale of the investment required to digitize and how you go about tackling that? Do you do it as one massive multi-year project, or is there a way to take this in bite-sized chunks?
Yeah, I would say in the beginning, I would not classify it as a huge investment because you think about some of the industrial sites that we have the opportunity to be a part of. There's so much, you have to break it down into pieces to get started. And really, in my opinion, to get started, it's about having the right use cases such that you can impact the business. If you get the right use cases, which are not expensive to develop, but I think you have to be strategic in nature to know which use cases to develop, because those use cases are put in place to influence all the other decision makers, the people in the C-suite, people below the C-suite. It helps everybody get on board such that when you start making further investments, they are not as difficult to make. It's not hard to go and get the CapEx to do these types of things. So,
is there an example you could share from your business of what that initial project might look like?
Most power plants are divided up into operations and maintenance departments. We had an opportunity at my plant this year. We decided to open up a technology office because if I got an operations question, I talk to my operations manager. If I got a maintenance question, I talk to my maintenance manager. But if I have a technology question, we all would sit in a room, kind of like on the last question, and say, who's going to take a stab at this question? But it was a game changer, I believe, for us because now we were able to go out and have digital type conversations in terms of what are those digital tools that we're going to need. How do we want to impact our business digitally to make us faster? One of the things that we talk about a lot is in terms of decision making. You may feel like you want to fix your pump for X reason. Dan, you may want to fix your pump for Y reason. And how do you make that decision? Today is based off emotions because you have two senior employees sitting in a room trying to debate it out. But in actuality, we may need to work on your pumps. So how do you turn that into a 0 and a 1 to make the best decision from a risk-based perspective to make the right thing happen? So we spend a lot of time in our technology office talking about the right tools to help us move down that road. Can we generate work orders on a daily basis based off different rules we put in place that spits it out? So when I think about the workforce of tomorrow, they're not going to have 20 years experience like some of us may have. So you're going to need these tools to supplement the knowledge that we're going to lose over the next couple of years.
For us, it's a big difference. Our application that we're most worried about right now or most interested in is looking across our entire fleet, whether it's individual pieces of equipment in dozens and dozens of different plants and comparing individual pieces of equipment, or whether it's comparing larger process units versus each other, but just taking a look at how to benchmark across individual plants. I'm sure you have the same issue. How's this plant doing versus the one in the state next over and the state next over? And for us, that's kind of even though we've been doing some of those things for a while, it's kind of a fast payout because you're doing something that you've wanted to do for a long time that's now enabled by all this communication and data exchange amongst locations.
I think a unique perspective, I guess, from the machine builder up here is kind of what we embarked on and the investment when our customer asked, well, what's that investment to get to this level? Really, that's what our business was. It was solutions. We partnered with Schneider, and they gave us these solutions that their investment is really just still improving their business, but through that improvement and that investment, we're making a less complex machine with higher productivity, less downtime, greater efficiency, and it's coming with all the things that the revolution is driving towards with the connectability, with all the data streaming that we can do with it, and that's the foundation for what's going to come, and they're ready, even if they don't know they're ready. So for them, it's still part of what their day-to-day operation is. Well, it's the decision to buy this one or that one, and ours is whatever the offering is, it has you ready, because that's the approach we took in our partnership. And the companies that go out and maybe don't shoulder all of it and say, oh, well, we need to make an IT group now, it's really the ones that'll win and come out on top are the ones that find the right partners and have the right ideas and do it together. So,
Jeff, a lot of these decisions are ultimately going to come to a CEO, CFO, CIO. How do you make sure that those senior executives are ready to make the types of decisions that are going to set the direction of the business for the next 20, 30, 50 years?
Well, I think we've got there's a large education component here. And especially because we look at our older executives, a lot of them didn't grow up with a lot of this. So like a lot of us, we've kind of learned it on the fly and been adopters of it. So I think that's a really important part of it. The other part is I think we have to break it up for them. We have to give it to them in small pieces. There's got to be here's a win, here's a value in doing something specific. As Johnny said, look at those use cases. You know, give them a couple things that are wins and show them the value in doing that. Because, for instance, in our industry, we've collected historical data for years. There's historians all over the water, wastewater industry. But many of the people just collect every piece of data in the historian. It's not cultured, it's not like, oh, we're going to collect these things a certain period of time, we're going to change the frequency of collection, et cetera. So we have got to get people to look at that data and look at small pieces of it and say, what wins can we achieve from the actual analytics of small pieces of data? Because to look at the entire encompassing database, we're not, especially in the water wastewater area, we're not staffed with people that even have those analytics. And the other thing in regards to what Johnny was saying is, IT and OT and a utility have always been at odds with each other, where most industries, IT is a big part of their growth. But our job in the past few years has been to really help converge those two and get them to play on the same team. And that's a significant challenge, I think, for CEOs and utility directors to understand that you can have a process going on in a plant, and with the growth of digitization, the IT folks need to be involved, because the typical operator is not a database technician. He is not going to configure an Ethernet switch. That's not his job. So we're looking at it more like take the people who are the experts in what they do that can best support those use cases and put them in play, and then educate the leaders as to how that should take place.
I think there's the two-part to that too. One of them is this. You come here and I'm further educated than 2 days ago just from coming and spending time with my peers and making new connections. And the other one, and especially in dealing with CEOs, and I'm sure mine will see this, is speaking that universal language of all of this really boils down to is the ROI. And when we can put that in front of them and say what we're talking about and all the buzzwords or hype or things that we're worried about on what's fact and what's fiction, it's driving to say, here's the data, because I think data is going to drive this revolution. Here's the data, here's your ROI. Here's where you hit your pillars of your speed, your efficiency, and your productivity, and this is driving it, and that's a language that all of us understand.
So taking the technology out of it and putting it in the language of business.
Right. With our machines, it's to make it less complex. The conversation can be less complex. It's here's all this great things if you want to dive deep and know it, if you are technical, But that's why I travel with my technical director, because I'm not. But I understand everything that he says he wants to do, because I'm looking at that bottom line, and this is very easy in a data-driven decision to say, here's that ROI.
I think one more perspective to add to this. When you think about some of our businesses are heavily regulated, and we all have things that we have to respond to from different governing bodies. Our belief is sooner or later, some regulators are going to ask the question, where are your analytics behind this decision that you made? So we got all this data that's been collected for years, and everybody in our country are reading all these articles about analytics and how it helps with decision making. Sooner or later, all of our businesses are going to be asked that question from our regulator. Well, show me your analytics if you decided to go right versus why you decided to didn't go left. Yep. And so that's going to come up. So it's another reason why CEOs, people in the C-suite need to really engage in this entire discussion, because we're going to be forced to more sooner than later.
Doug, you've been collecting data for years. It's far more data than any human can dig into and make sense of. Where does artificial intelligence come into this? Is that the answer that can find those data points that are going to drive our business?
Yeah, so that really is the $64,000 question, right? There's been a lot of work in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of discussion. My view and my experience is that we're still on the cusp of that. Okay? And I think it's one of these things where everyone has their own individual threshold where you say, okay, here's where I'm talking about modeling, and here's where I'm talking about machine learning, and here's artificial intelligence. And I think people are still calibrating their own personal and global scales on that. So what I've seen is a lot of things that we discuss as artificial intelligence so far that can be applied in industry are really more advanced machine learning and modeling techniques. And there's a ways to go for AI. I'm always amused when somebody brings me a new product to take a look at in my current role, and they say, this product has 6 AIs built into it. And then you have to stop and ask what that means. So we've looked at AI technology, and some of them are very good, but finding ways to apply them in our manufacturing and business decision-making processes has still been a bit of a stretch.
So Daniel, whenever we talk artificial intelligence, it's the rise of the robots. They're going to take over the world, remove all the jobs. And that is a real concern that I think lots of industrial workers are thinking about. Is my job going to be secure? Am I going to have to retrain? Will I have a job in 5, 10, 15 years? How are the skills that your business requires going to change? And is there still a place for humans?
Right, so absolutely, and this is something that I think talked with Carlos on the way here. You get asked it all the time when someone asks, what do you do? And well, I'm in automation, and everyone feels that there's been someone they know or impacted by that transition. Just looking at numbers alone, from the last 30 years, the number of full-time employees in the U.S. has risen 30 million. So I know at the micro level, those jobs are transitioning elsewhere, but at the macro, it's growth. Automation is driving that growth, because that's the revolution that we were coming out of, is all of this automation. I know our intent and what we do in our offerings and our solutions and what we're automating are those positions that are high risk, the repetitive motions, the lifting requirements. It's all those things that we try to make that job an easier and safer job. And then some of it transitions to, well, then the other challenge we have, make it less complex to operate that machine. And that's what we've done, honestly, with Operator Advisor, is we've taken a very complex, high-speed automated machine, and what we found and what you're going to be finding in the workforce and at any level is anyone can operate a tablet. And on that, they can hone their skills and build their confidence and interact with the machine in a safe way. And that's where we push automation. And as far as AI entering the scene and can you replace humans, AI is going to drive optimization. It's going to drive what it needs to drive because as humans, we're not capable or there's not enough of us that can sit and look at all that data. But innovation will always come from humans. That's why we have this group here. That's why we have the group that's found success for many years in the positions we're in, is the innovation still comes from the human element. We need the AI to help get, as Johnny said, the small increments of improvement from here out, because there isn't the push in this revolution is not going to be, oh, here's this new solution. It's how do we refine it and make it better.
Johnny, how can you see workers at your plant, how can you see their skills changing over the years? And is it a case of retraining, or is it completely different employees coming in?
I don't think it's a conversation of retraining, because with all the sensors and things that you have to have in the plant, you still need an electrician and an I&C technician to connect all this stuff. So in terms of those core jobs will always be there. But like my good buddy right here said, AI and all these things we're talking about really impacts risk in terms of, can I operate this plant safely and remove a human from a risky situation? Help me put together a risk-based plan on what equipment should I work on. That may drive a different skill set in terms of a data scientist, someone that could help you at the local level mine through data and help you make better decisions. But I just think at the fundamental core for basic electricity, running a power plant, it's about helping people be safer. We're still going to need those core jobs. At the end of that, again, I spoke about this earlier, when you know you have a workforce that's exiting and you have a new workforce entering, there is no way you can replace 30 years of experience. If you want a 30-year operator, you need 30 years. That's how it used to be. Granted, we've sped it up a little bit with some of the advances that we have, and I think these techniques that we're talking about today can impact that 30-year number and bring it down. That's what this discussion is all about. But the fundamental jobs at the core, I don't believe change right now.
I'd just like to second that the core jobs in the plant, a lot of us work in industries where the workforce in the plant is pretty lean already in terms of number of people.
Correct.
And you need people to go out and do inspections and look at equipment and do electrical work and do machinist work. Those jobs are going to be there. It really is important to think about the advances that are available now in terms of personal safety, and that's something that's really important for us. You know, there's a lot of work being done on wearables and human sensors and whatnot that we're frequently thinking about how to instrument the plants, but there are probably opportunities in instrumenting the workforce a little differently than we've done that in the past as well, and I think that's an important frontier for folks to be looking at. I just wanted to comment on jobs. So there are new jobs that are available, and we tend to think of a lot of these projects collectively, I think, the audience, as equipment installation jobs, but really a lot of these things are software projects that are masquerading as hardware projects. And there's a lot of software behind what goes on. And that is kind of the new frontier for job opportunities as we see it, clearly. The folks that are going to be doing programming and the data analytics work is really a change in the workforce.
We have a little bit of a different problem. We have a very quickly decreasing workforce in the public utility market, especially in those areas where highly technical competence is required because of the pay level and the kind of the future forward path for these folks. And I remember when we used to start automation in a wastewater plant, and everybody was so fearful that the operators were going to lose their jobs. And we would say, well, you know, by the time we finish these automated processes, it's actually going to give you time to do the maintenance that you haven't been able to do. And over the years, we've never really reduced the workforce. And the other side of the public utilities, why the people are so important, and no matter how much we automate, is that we're dealing with water, which is, you know, one of the most precious things on earth. And if we run into water issues, lack of water, poor water quality, those kind of things. There needs to be seasoned public people in that area to speak to the public. And a lot of the utilities are trying to be much more transparent with the public. And I think that's one of the challenges we're going to see is not only are we losing some of the older, more experienced operators and the intellectual property is leaving the industry, but we also need those older leaders who are really good at the public transparency side of things, which is really, really important in the water and wastewater industry because it's something we all use.
So one of the points Alma raised at the top of the session was that it's no longer an option to digitize or not digitize. You're going to have to digitize or you'll be obsolete. Is it too late for those companies that haven't started their journey yet, Jeff, or do you think they can catch up?
No, I don't think it's too late. I have a colleague that wrote a book about technology called Big Wave Surfing, and he's built his entire life about being on the top of the wave before it crashes, and being at the right time. But, I look at industries like ours where we know we're the slow adapters, but there's adaptation still to come. It's not like we're going to be on the top of the wave, catching the height of the technology. But as we go forward with this reduced workforce, with having to do more with less, we are going to be forced to look at these things. The other item that is key to our industry is that we've often built these SCADA systems and built up historians, and without the technical expertise, a lot of them aren't really relevant to the operators. And as we look at the things we've seen in the innovation booths and the types of software applications that are being applied now, they're much more user-friendly to what this operator really needs to run a water system versus just seeing lights and switches turn off and on an HMI. And I think going forward, that's going to be why we progress, is because people like Schneider are making things that are more relevant to the actual operations of the facility versus the way we have been running it.
Doug, what are the barriers to adoption? What have you come across that's slowed adoption or stopped adoption in your industry, and what are you hearing?
Well, we have kind of opposing forces on this. If you look at, I'll take us as an example, but it's kind of common across the industry. The industry spends a tremendous amount of capital every year for new plants and new operating equipment that's going in on an annual basis. I mean, just for us alone, it's $40 billion, so it's a lot. There's not a big barrier in the new plants that are going in. We look for things that are cost-justified improvements over systems that are currently installed. The big barrier or difficulty is in our immense installed capital base, and that's for oil and gas and chemicals. That's a really big deal because you have a lot of plants that have been out there. The systems don't turn over that fast, and in fact, that's why we're big proponents of open systems in this area going forward, where it's easier to mix and match pieces or from different suppliers. We really appreciate Schneider's view on how that ought to move forward. And I think that's what's going to allow industry to be nimble in the future, to be able to make small incremental improvements rather than large turnovers of the entire system. So, barriers in some places and strong pull in others.
I think we see the same as Doug really just nailed it, and speaking internally to his company. In our position, we deal with many, many companies and many, many customers. And we see the same thing. The established accounts and customers that we've done business with for 30 years, sometimes they're the ones with the barrier of, well, we know what we're doing, we trust your product, and we're getting X, Y, Z out of it, and why are you trying to change to this and go in this direction? And that's where that education comes into it, and that's where just showing them what that ROI is going to be on it, because frankly, it's our new customers coming in. It's the aha moments we had when you speak to that of we had the U.S.'s second largest processed food producer in our factory on Friday, and Schneider brought them in, and we went through our factory and automation and looked at all these great things of sanitary design and things that are important to them. And you talk about equipping many factories with tons of automation, and it was the whole, well, you know, another thing we have to meet is this energy consumption goal that we've been pushed down by our CEO, and we just don't know how we can meet that if we're just going to put all this automation in our factory. And the light bulb went off for even me, because that was also the solution to their energy consumption. Coming in with all servos and replacing older equipment with AC motors and all of that is the same path to reach all of their goals and making that direction. And so it seems like the new touches and the people out looking for it, there is no barrier. It's about what other challenges can we help them overcome together. But it's a lot in the established ones where it's quite the challenge to get over that hurdle sometimes.
So we have a few minutes left before the end of the session, so I want to round up with a nice, easy question to finish on. You know, we've talked about the first, second, third, and fourth industrial revolution. What does the fifth industrial revolution look like, and when might we expect to see it start? Has it already started?
That's easy.
Go on.
You call that an easy question? I think Doug's going to answer that one first.
Take as long as you need.
Hey, we're not going to go down the black hole route.
We're not doing that one, not the black hole.
No.
So I was discussing prior to this that I said I have one that I just want everyone to write down. Again, I'm talking to my technical director, and he said, just take it to the bank, and we're all digitized, so in 30 years you can look us up and find us and say, hey, you were correct, you were right. But it's going to be materials science. So you look at what we're able to do now that was unimaginable years ago, recent years ago, that we can 3D print metals. People are printing parts and plastics. We're even printing chocolate. And there's going to be this evolution of, we know what we wrap, we know what that little Danish is, cooked with all the elements of sugar and all the molecules in it. And we're saying at some point, you're going to take that manufacturing just straight to the end user, and you'll be printing your Danish in your kitchen and have it there. So write it down, 30 years, material science.
You know, I have to agree with that from the standpoint of we're always looking for parts. And when you operate a 30-year-old facility, sometimes parts are not available. But what 3D printing will allow us to do with the evolution of material science is to be able to print whatever we need right on site. And think about how fast that helps you solve issues and problems. If you got to make a small design change, if you just need something you hadn't used in 20 years, that's a game changer. So I totally agree with that.
Doug, what's going to revolutionize petrochem?
Yeah, so, you know, I could go materials, or I could say that we're still not doing biology in real time. Even though there have been tremendous advances there. So if you look at the fourth revolution as kind of a cyber physical connection, there's still a bio component to that in real time that's missing. And you know, I don't know what it will be. That would be my stab, but it's going to be exciting to find out.
Well, for us, it's going to be that once we've reached the use of the IIoT type devices, the analytics that are going to come back from our processes are going to be greatly enhanced what we do now, and especially in the utility area, I think it's going to make a huge difference. And it's just that we haven't seen those analytics yet, and I think that's a whole nother piece is what comes back. And it's funny, you think back of Star Trek, you know, and they'd say computer. Well, you know, we've got all sorts of those things happening now, you know. I mean, so you look at industrial revolutions, but I think if you look at all four of them, you know, all of them have impacted the personal lives of people, you know, you know, all sorts of things that resonate across all of society. And this fourth one, naturally, we think is going to maybe have a parallel, which is going to be low-level, low-paying jobs, and high-level and high-paying jobs, and the middle class is going to be left in a vacuum. You know, maybe if the fifth generation comes back to where we actually, you know, build things in the plant again to repair a part we can't get, maybe the middle class gets back into the picture again. Hard to tell.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the top of the hour. Can I ask you to show your appreciation, please, for our panelists?